We're coming to you live of a news conference out of DeKalb County. More about the 3 inmates who escaped from the jail. We expect to learn more about their escape and how they were captured. Right now is the Sheriff, Melody Maddox, standing by. That news conference beginning now.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. I am DeKalb County Sheriff Melody Maddox, and I want to report this morning that the streets of DeKalb County are once again safe. They're safe for our communities, and we want to say that is because of the swift action of the law enforcement that you see standing here and others. I especially have to give a thank you to our fugitive and field operations unit. We also have standing here the United States Marshal Service, Marshal Thomas Brown of the Northern District of Georgia. His team include Eric Hines, Acting Chief for the Southeast Regional Task Force and the South Florida Caribbean Regional Task Force. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our DeKalb County Police Department Chief of Police, Chief Pedrick, our community partners who reached out during this time, Clayton County Sheriff Levon Allen and Fulton County Sheriff Labatt, who reached out to assist, to ask what was needed. They asked because their concern was for their community as well, because what happens in one community can surely happen in another. And one of the things that I made sure that on December the 1st of 2019, I made a vow. I made a vow to protect the citizens of DeKalb County. I made a vow and I stuck to it. I'm going to continue to stick to it. This will not be tolerated. We're going to continue to fight and make sure that our family, friends, and loved ones are safe and that people know that they can come into DeKalb County and enjoy, live, work, and play. As I announced when we began the process of trying to recapture these 3 inmates who escaped from this jail on Sunday night, my primary focus is to make sure that you all know that DeKalb County Jail is secure. This is a breach. We're not going to sit here and go back and forth and point blame. We're going to focus on what can we do to stop it from happening in the future. We're going to be asking for things to assist us with this aging facility that's deteriorating right before our eyes. We're going to look at improvements that are needed here. We know that it's going to cost money. We know what it costs. But we either pay now or it's going to be a payment later. So I want to thank all of you all for coming out. To the media, I say thank you because you all did put it out there. Oftentimes, we don't want to say thank you to the media, but I will say thank you because you all put it out there and you let them know that we are looking. And we're not going to stop. My team and I have not slept. We've rested, but we have not slept. And we don't sleep when things of this nature happen. These are one of many incidents probably has taken place throughout the world of escapes from jails and prisons. But here at the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, we jumped into action immediately, and we didn't stop until these individuals were brought back to custody and that our streets are safe so that our children can go out and enjoy the holidays, enjoy their gifts, so our family members can enjoy other family members. So I want to turn this over to my chief, Chief Atkins, who will be able to give more information as it entails in regards to what took place on Sunday night.
Good morning. The reason we're here today is due to the escape from the DeKalb County Jail. In talking about that escape, what I'll start with is the individuals that left our facility. Stevenson Charles, age 24, charged with murder and armed robbery in DeKalb County. He was here in our facility under a felony life sentence for murder through the federal system. Yusuf Minor, age 31, charged with 2 counts of armed robbery and 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony in DeKalb County. Also here under sentence from the state system. Naod Yohannes, age 25, charged with simple assault, arson, and unlawful acts of violence in a penal institution. Those are the reasons that we're here today, because these gentlemen chose to try to escape or effect an escape from our facility. I'm going to turn it over to Marshal Brown, who will tell you about the ongoing investigation and the tracking down of these individuals. Marshal Brown.
Thank you. See if I can get my paperwork here in some kind of order. The United States Marshal Service immediately came to the assistance of the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, who is one of our strongest partners, when we were contacted to help them locate this individual. Because there is a member of the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Sheriff Williams, on that task force, it was very easy for him to put the file together and present it to Chief, I'm sorry, I just drew a senior moment, Chief Hines, desk to approve those folders and start this in action. Now, this was 2 separate federal task forces that we had operating. Because Stevenson was a federal inmate that had escaped, then the the U.S. Marshals Service took the lead on finding and apprehending him. That particular task laid at the hands of Chief John Stevens, who works in the district office, and the group of task force members that are located in my office. The other 2 individuals, who are state actors, became the charge of the Southeast Regional Task Force under the command of Regional Chief Hines, and so we work parallel together. As long as the 3 inmates remain together, and we had information to suggest that they were, and I will talk about that later, then those 2 task forces will continue to work together for that one effort. But at any time, if Stevenson had broke away from that group, then it would have become on Chief Stevens, who would be the incident commander on tracking Stevenson down. He was our main target. That's who we was focused on, and Chief Hines, working with the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office task force, would concentrate on the other 2. At around 11 p.m., information from the DeKalb County recorded inmate lines, when they determined that these individuals was gone, led them to an individual who had made contact or was contacted by Stevenson to meet them outside the jail at a location when they facilitated this escape. That was done, and yes, that was done successfully, and they were picked up by a gentleman, you'll find that in the report later. This thing gets very voluminous. So they were picked up and they was taken to the girlfriend's house of inmate Minor. Inmate Minor's girlfriend then contacted a Lyft to pick up the 3 inmates and transport them to an address in Florida. That took place. We were able to, using the intelligence of the Marshal Service, track that movement. No need to talk about how and what we use, just we're the U.S. Marshals and we have ways to track. And so we tracked them all the way to Florida and made the arrest in the metropolitan Miami area. Those individuals were picked up there without incident. As you can imagine, the Lyft driver is very traumatized by this. She's being interviewed by the FBI for additional kidnap charges, as well as other things of that nature. So the system worked the way it's supposed to work. It would not work this well had it not been for the great relationship and partnership that we have with local law enforcement partners, state law enforcement partners, as well as our federal partners as well. So that's it in a nutshell, and as we take questions, at least from my end, please understand this investigation is ongoing. We want to make sure that the U.S. Attorney, as it relates to Stevenson, has an airtight case. And so you're going to get a lot of, I can't answer that question for you as we go through this motion. So with that, I turn it back over to Chief of the DeKalb County Jail.
Thank you, sir. We will entertain questions at this time.
Can you tell us exactly how these inmates are able to get outside of the jail building itself?
Okay. First, let's start by saying that we operate a 30-plus-year-old facility. And as with the building of such, some of the infrastructure can be compromised with effort by the inmates. That being the case in this instance, we would not like to be more specific as not to give out the person's ideas of how to further compromise this building. But we are making some adjustments, being assisted by the county to shore up the infrastructure and to make adjustment with our policies regarding to this incident.
But Chief Maddox mentioned some changes.
That's Sheriff Maddox.
Yes, excuse me, Sheriff Maddox mentioned some changes that you'd like to make, by the way. Could you tell us exactly like what you're looking to change about the infrastructure of the jail without giving away how these inmates are able to get out?
To be honest, at this time, we're not discussing those things because we're ongoing, doing those evaluations and making sure that we're doing a comprehensive job in regards to that.
Can you clarify, Marshall did talk about that there's a phone call. So are we saying that one of the inmates called someone to pick them up and coordinate with the girlfriend of one of the other suspects? Can you explain that, again, how that worked and how you were able to, I guess, monitor the phone call, and that's how you knew this was going on?
Okay, if you're familiar with the jail environment, all of our phone calls between inmates and citizens is recorded. So we utilized our internal intelligence unit to start to review calls that would have been made by those particular inmates or just calls that were made out of that particular pod, which is a normal standard operating procedure.
The DeKalb County just opened up the new real-time crime center. Did that play a role in this search? And if it did, was it an effective role?
In this particular instance, the components of having the U.S. Marshals involved, it didn't, necessitate us using the real-time communication center. So we didn't utilize it this time, but we expect in the near future, in any incident that we have, we'll be using it. But the fact that our federal partners needed to be brought into this, it was more along the operation of the federal partners and us.
What was the clue that the infrastructure was compromised? Was this based on when you're looking to see how they got out, or was it based on, say, listening to the phone calls? Was this something that you were somewhat aware of and someone picked at it and was able to get out? I mean, what are we talking? When were you aware that this particular piece of infrastructure was compromised?
It was discovered when our officer was doing his feeding times. So once he entered the cell and did his preliminary check, he was able to discover that a portion of the cell had been compromised. We subsequently started to do our investigation at that time.
Chief, can you explain the timeline for us? So you guys figured out that these 3 men were missing sometime overnight, but when did you actually notify the public? Because, I know different news outlets were calling to say, hey, can you confirm this? And do you believe the fact that the public was not made aware earlier that it could have put people in danger?
It's our assertion that the public was made aware as soon as we were made aware. Now we had probably a small amount of time where we had to assess what we actually had. You just can't go out there and start to sound the alarm without figuring out what you have. The difference between the time that they exited the facility and the time that we got onto it, there was some distance in between there because of the activities that were going on. If you know about a jail, we executed one activity, then we come back several hours later or, and do our next round. So that's the distance that people may think that we didn't notify anybody, but you have to understand that there's not an omnipresence in that cell, so that's the gap there. Then once we realized in that amount of time that they were out or that they subsequently were missing, then we had to figure out if they were still in the building somewhere, and then figure out, once we figured out they had exited the building, then that's when we went forward with alerting the public.
How long was that gap, though?
I think it probably was about 4 hours, but like I said, there was a lot going on in between that.
Chief, do you have a general statement about safety? I understand that the sheriff did say that the jail is now secure, and you are going to be implementing some things and make sure that this doesn't happen again. But since the jail is now being secure, has anything been implemented already?
Okay, we repaired the area that was compromised, and we're looking at other areas that are similar to that to fortify them to make sure that they're not compromised in the same manner. That's the thing I can tell you right now. We've elevated our round pattern just for a sake, so we're just doing more rounds right now till we get those other things fortified.
My last question is just speaking to community and safety, because we're seeing a lot of these escapes going on in the metro area. Are you guys partnering with other police agencies so that you guys can kind of do something to kind of bring this number down with escape fees happening?
Okay, unfortunately, you know, our main focus is the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. And as the sheriff spoke to briefly, we're always in the business of partnering with our local agencies, the DeKalb County PD, and all of the municipalities. Anytime there's an instance like this, we lean on those individuals to try to assist us. We think we do a fairly good job on a day-to-day basis, making sure that our facility is safe, and we'll continue to do that.
Can the marshal clarify that?
Chief, not to belabor the point, but, you know, we knew about this escape for about 6 hours before it was actually confirmed. Can you explain why that happened?
As I said before, we gave out the information as soon as we understood exactly what we had. We will never give out information prematurely because that only causes chaos. So some of your time frames may not align with the time frame that we have in order to give the public the best information and to be able to execute a plan. So those are the differences. But what we will stand on is the fact that we always have the DeKalb County citizens, the citizens of the metro Atlanta area, and the citizens of Georgia at our forefront of our thought process. And we're gonna always get the information out at the best time that we can do so. Sometimes that won't align with what the public wants, sometimes that won't align with what the media wants, but I guarantee you it aligns with what the situation dictates.
Was anyone hurt while these guys were out?
Not in our, to our knowledge.
Can you clarify, Stevenson Charles, I know there were 2 people that were state inmates and others were federal inmates. Can you clarify that? Because Stevenson Charles pled guilty in Gwinnett County. Can you explain why he was in a jail, which is generally for people who are awaiting trial? Can you explain that?
Okay, as most people know, individuals just don't perpetrate crimes in one area. So he had been held accountable for his crimes in Gwinnett and his federal crimes, but that doesn't mean he was gonna dodge the crimes in DeKalb County. So he was extradited back to our facility to be held accountable for those charges or those crimes that he perpetuated in our area.
Even with a life sentence?
That occurs.
Or will these inmates be extradited back to the state of Georgia to stand trial? We know, are all 3 of them in Broward County right now?
You want to speak to that, Marshall?
They will eventually come back to Georgia to face the state charges here in Georgia. Go to your point, sir. Stevenson was in this facility on a production order to appear in the DeKalb County Superior Court for a pending trial scheduled for January 6th. That's why he was here.
So there was no, and this may be, you may not have any idea, but there were no negotiations for that case? Because if someone, put it this way, and if you're in a state facility, we tend to think of state facilities as being safer than a county jail. Obviously, the sheriff has talked about need for improvements here, and I imagine going to the county commission and asking for more, but that was a risk. If you're in a situation where you are sentenced to life in prison to continue to go forward with a state case, are we aware of any efforts to make sure that case was pled out or whatever, so we wouldn't be in a situation with someone who was here for, pled guilty to I guess it was like I forget what the charge was, but basically, kidnapping.
That will be a question directed to the district attorney of that county. They will be the one to bring those charges forward.
I have a question for the sheriff. You know, a lot of people were on edge for a very long time.
Sure.
There were some people who were frankly right across the street from the jail that I talked to about this. They didn't even know that 3 men had escaped the jail. Moving forward, what do you plan to do to make sure the citizens of DeKalb County are safe and and that something like this does not happen again?
Moving forward, I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing, making sure they're safe. They're safe now. That's why these individuals are in the custody. And when you talk about what we're going to put in place, we already have things in place. Let me just say this, and I want to say this really quick. Some people lead by, authority and power. I lead by faith and prayer. I pray. I pray this agency up. I pray for my citizens. So when you talk about making sure that they are safe, that's why we have these partners right here. That's why we do assessments on this facility to make sure that this building is safe and that this does not happen. And as Chief said, we're not going to put any information out there unless it's valid and it has been verified to make sure that the citizens of DeKalb County are getting the valid information that they're supposed to have. So that's the way it works with us, and we're going to continue to do it. We've done a great job, and I'm going to say this and lead this and end this questions right here. They're asking me to make bricks out of straws. And we're doing the best we can with what we have. And I think we've done an outstanding job, and nobody's going to take away the fact of what DeKalb County Sheriff Office has been doing and will continue to do for the citizens of DeKalb County, not just the citizens of DeKalb County, but for the state of Georgia. And I will always remain convinced to the citizens that I will do everything in my power to make sure that these inmates are treated with dignity and respect, for those that commit crimes are held accountable, but not only that, to make sure that my employees are taken care of. Because my employees are the ones that have to sit here and have to work in this facility. These are the ones, you have our field division that have to go out to the fields and make sure that we keep those streets safe. Yes, DeKalb County PD answers the 911 calls. I worked for 11 years as a DeKalb County police officer. Chief Patrick and I worked side by side. The answering of the calls is only one solution to the problem. The conditions and where these individuals reside is another, and where we work. And this is what we have to deal with. And I want those citizens to know that I remain committed and dedicated to the word that I gave when I gave that oath on December 1st of 2019. And I stand here and I say that with conviction and passion, and I will continue to fight for DeKalb County Sheriff Office and all the citizens that I love. I'm from here, I work here, I live here, and I play here. And I don't walk in fear. I don't fear anybody. I only fear one person, and that's God. And I'm going to continue to do what God has ordered me to do, and that's to walk in the path to keep my community safe. Thank you, and you all have a good day.
Will any of the officers inside the jail be held accountable?
Sheriff Melody Maddox wrapping up a news conference there about the escape involving 3 inmates. Not answering that final question shouted at her. Will any of our jailers be held responsible for this escape? Anybody placed on administrative leave? If they are, we don't know right now. In fact, there are a lot more questions than answers after that 20-minute news conference or so involving the sheriff. The majority of those questions, though, being answered by her chief deputy. 3 inmates who escaped on Sunday night now back in custody. They were captured in the Metro Miami area, making their way from DeKalb County, Georgia to Miami with the help of several different people along the way. We learned that one of those inmates, Stevenson Charles, who you see on the left-hand side of your screen, called somebody from inside jail and effectively said, "We plan to make this escape. Pick us up outside the jail." According to those officials, they were picked up by a gentleman and then taken to Mr. Minor's girlfriend's house. Mr. Minor, Yusuf Minor, the man there in the middle. And then they made their way to Miami, Florida at some point. According to the officials speaking, it sounded like a Lyft driver had taken them, and there might be some kidnapping charges that are going to be tacked on. Additional charges forthcoming, as you can imagine, after this escape for all 3 gentlemen. The sheriff at one point saying, "This was a breach. We are not going to place blame." She mentioned the aging infrastructure of that facility and really left it open to interpretation as to how these 3 were able to escape the DeKalb County Jail. They said that the infrastructure was compromised. This is a massive facility, as you see here. It was first built, construction started back in 1991. It was finished in 1993. There you see some of the U.S. Marshals and other folks searching for the inmates through the woods yesterday, though it would be miles and miles away in another state where they were finally found. But there's the facility there. The sheriff's saying they're asking me to make bricks out of straws. Well, 3 people escaped from that brick facility yesterday, Sunday rather, and were recaptured yesterday. And a lot of questions remain as to how that was able to happen. We do know that officials say they repaired the area that was compromised. Again, we don't know exactly how it was compromised, what kind of tools were used, if this was one cell, if this was 3 cells. And we also don't know whether anybody's going to be held accountable at the jail. The sheriff saying, again, quote, not going to place blame. But it did sound like in that news conference she was setting the stage to perhaps ask the county for a new jail or money for some new improvements there at a facility that is 30 years old. We are following this story throughout the day here on 11 Alive Plus and on 11alive.com. We have more questions, as we're sure you do as well. But the bottom line from that news conference today, the 3 inmates now back in custody after being recaptured in the metro Miami area, though how they first escaped from the DeKalb County Jail and were able to go undetected for hours still remains unclear. Reporting live from the 11 Alive Streaming Center, I'm Dan Kennedy.